The morning sun cast long shadows across the abandoned warehouse district when Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison received the emergency call. His SEAL team had been conducting routine training exercises at the naval base when headquarters crackled through their communication system with urgent instructions. A high-value target had been spotted in the industrial sector, and immediate extraction was required. Morrison gathered his 5-man team within minutes. These were seasoned operators who had served together through countless missions in hostile territories. Staff Sergeant Mike Chen, their demolitions expert, checked his gear with practiced efficiency. Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez adjusted his sniper rifle scope, while Communications Specialist Thompson tested the radio equipment. The newest addition to their unit, Petty Officer Williams, secured the medical kit that might prove essential for whatever they were walking into. The briefing was sparse on details, which wasn't unusual for rapid response situations. Intelligence suggested a female operative had been compromised during a covert mission. She was reportedly injured and trapped in a warehouse complex that had become a gathering point for hostile forces. The area was known for drug trafficking and illegal arms dealing, making it particularly dangerous for any government agent operating alone. As their armored vehicle approached the perimeter, Morrison studied the satellite images on his tablet. The warehouse complex sprawled across several acres, with multiple buildings connected by narrow alleyways and loading docks. Perfect terrain for ambushes and difficult extractions. The kind of place where even experienced operators could find themselves in serious trouble. Chen pointed out potential entry points, while Rodriguez identified elevated positions for overwatch. The team had performed similar extractions dozens of times. But something about this mission felt different. The intelligence was too vague, and the timeline too compressed. Usually, they had hours or even days to plan these operations. This time, they were going in with minimal preparation. The vehicle stopped 3 blocks from the target location. Morrison checked his watch and established their timeline. They would approach from the east, using the morning sun to mask their movement. Rodriguez would take position on a nearby rooftop to provide cover, while the rest of the team moved through the ground level, systematically. As they advanced through the empty streets, Morrison noticed the unusual quiet that had settled over the area. No traffic, no pedestrians, even the usual street vendors were absent. It was as if the entire district had been evacuated, leaving only the sound of their boots on cracked pavement and the distant hum of industrial machinery. Thompson's radio crackled with updates from base operations. No change in the situation, no additional intelligence, and no backup units available for immediate support. They were operating alone, which meant any complications would have to be handled with the resources they brought with them. The first warehouse came into view as they rounded a corner. Broken windows and graffiti-covered walls suggested the building had been abandoned for years, but fresh tire tracks in the dirt indicated recent activity. Morrison signaled for the team to spread out and approach from multiple angles. Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces as he reached his overwatch position. The surrounding area appeared clear, but thermal imaging showed heat signatures inside several buildings. Too many to be just one injured operative and her captors. This was beginning to look like a much larger operation than anyone had anticipated. Williams checked his medical equipment one more time, knowing that battlefield medicine might be the difference between a successful extraction and a tragedy. He had seen too many operations where proper preparation saved lives that might otherwise have been lost to poor planning or inadequate supplies. Chen studied the warehouse structure and identified potential weak points where explosives might be needed to create new entry points or eliminate threats. The building's age meant that load-bearing walls might not withstand much stress, which could be useful if they needed to bring down barriers quickly. Morrison made the final decision to proceed with the mission despite the unknowns. His team was trained for exactly these kinds of situations, where incomplete information and dangerous circumstances required immediate action. They had trained together for months, building the kind of trust and communication that allowed them to function as a single unit, even when separated by distance or obstacles. The approach to the main warehouse required crossing an open courtyard that offered little cover. Morrison decided they would move quickly in pairs, with Rodriguez providing overwatch from his elevated position. If hostile forces were present, they would likely reveal themselves during this vulnerable phase of the operation. As they prepared to cross the courtyard, Thompson received an unexpected transmission on his radio. A weak voice, barely audible through static, spoke just 2 words that changed everything about their understanding of the mission. The voice was female, calm despite obvious pain, and carried an authority that none of them had expected from someone who was supposed to be a victim needing rescue. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the team with more questions than answers as they prepared to enter what they now realized might be something completely different from the extraction mission they had been briefed to expect. The woman emerged from the shadows of the warehouse like a ghost materializing from the darkness. Morrison's team had expected to find someone cowering in a corner, waiting for rescue. Instead, they discovered someone who moved with the fluid precision of a trained operative, despite the obvious injuries that marked her body. Blood stained her torn jacket, and a makeshift bandage covered what appeared to be a gunshot wound on her left shoulder. Her dark hair was matted with dirt and sweat, and a cut above her right eyebrow had left dried blood across her face. But her eyes held none of the fear or desperation they had anticipated. Instead, they blazed with an intensity that immediately put Morrison on alert. She stood approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a lean build that suggested both strength and agility. Despite her injuries, she maintained perfect posture and kept her hands visible but ready to move. Everything about her body language communicated danger rather than vulnerability. Chen was the first to speak, his weapon lowered but still ready. He asked if she was the operative they had been sent to extract, expecting confirmation that would allow them to begin the evacuation procedure. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and studied each team member with the calculating gaze of someone assessing potential threats. Rodriguez's voice crackled through their earpieces with a warning that changed the entire dynamic of their mission. Through his scope, he had spotted movement in the surrounding buildings. Multiple figures were taking positions around the warehouse complex, and they appeared to be armed with military-grade equipment. This was no random criminal activity or drug operation. Williams stepped forward with his medical kit, concerned about the woman's obvious injuries and the amount of blood loss she had already sustained. She held up one hand to stop his approach, a gesture that carried absolute authority, despite her apparent condition. When she spoke, her voice was steady and controlled, with no trace of the pain that her wounds must have been causing. She identified herself using a code designation that none of them recognized from their briefing materials. The numbers and letters meant nothing to Morrison, but the way she delivered them suggested someone with legitimate government credentials. Thompson immediately began attempting to verify her identity through secure channels, but the communication difficulties they had been experiencing made confirmation impossible. The woman began moving toward the rear of the warehouse, gesturing for the SEAL team to follow. Her gait revealed the extent of her injuries, but she maintained a pace that suggested urgency rather than incapacitation. Morrison made the tactical decision to follow while keeping his team ready for whatever complications might arise. As they moved deeper into the building, the woman began explaining the real situation they had walked into. The extraction mission had been a deception from the beginning. She was not a compromised operative needing rescue, but rather someone who had deliberately allowed herself to be injured and cornered in order to draw out a much larger threat. Chen's demolitions experience kicked in as he studied the warehouse structure around them. Someone had been busy in this building, installing equipment and modifications that transformed it from an abandoned facility into something resembling a fortress. The implications of these discoveries were beginning to reshape his understanding of what they were facing. Rodriguez continued providing updates on the external situation, and the news was growing worse by the minute. The number of armed figures surrounding the complex had tripled, and they appeared to be coordinating their movements with military precision. This was not a rescue operation anymore, but potentially a major engagement with unknown hostile forces. Williams noticed details about the woman's injuries that didn't match the story they had been told. The wounds were consistent with deliberate positioning rather than random violence. Someone with extensive medical training had treated them, and the blood loss had been carefully controlled. She had allowed herself to be injured, but not disabled. Thompson's attempts to establish communication with headquarters continued to fail, leaving the team isolated and operating without backup or additional intelligence. The radio interference was too consistent to be accidental, suggesting that someone was actively jamming their communications to prevent outside assistance. The woman led them to a hidden section of the warehouse where sophisticated equipment had been installed. Computer monitors, communication arrays, and weapons storage indicated that this location had been serving as an operational base for weeks, or possibly months. Nothing about this setup suggested the random criminal activity they had been briefed to expect. Morrison demanded a complete explanation of what they had walked into, but the woman's response only deepened the mystery. She spoke about threats to national security that went beyond anything his team had been trained to handle. The extraction mission had been designed to bring exactly the right kind of military personnel to this location at this specific time. Chen discovered explosive devices that had been professionally installed throughout the building's foundation. The placement and sophistication suggested someone with advanced military engineering knowledge. If detonated, these charges would bring down the entire complex and everything within a significant radius. Rodriguez reported that the hostile forces outside had completed their encirclement of the warehouse complex. Escape routes were being systematically eliminated, and the weapons being deployed suggested that whoever was orchestrating this operation had access to military-grade equipment and unlimited resources. The woman finally revealed the truth that transformed everything about their situation. She was not the victim of this operation, but rather its architect. The injuries were real but deliberately inflicted to make her story convincing. The hostile forces outside were not there to capture her, but to eliminate everyone who had responded to the false extraction request. Williams realized that his medical assessment had been correct from the beginning. The woman's injuries were serious but not immediately life-threatening, and they had been carefully managed to maintain her operational capability while creating the appearance of vulnerability. Thompson's communication equipment suddenly came back online, but instead of contact with headquarters, they received a transmission that revealed the scope of what they were facing. Multiple teams had been dispatched to similar locations throughout the region, all responding to false emergency calls that were designed to eliminate key military personnel. The transformation was immediate and shocking. The injured woman, who had seemed vulnerable moments before, moved with lethal efficiency as the first wave of armed figures breached the warehouse perimeter. Morrison watched in stunned silence as she retrieved weapons from hidden compartments he hadn't even noticed. Her every movement calculated and precise despite her wounds. Chen found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about tactical operations, as the woman demonstrated skills that surpassed those of many special forces operatives he had worked alongside. She assembled a modified assault rifle from components hidden throughout the warehouse, her injured shoulder apparently not limiting her dexterity or speed. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the building as hostile forces began their coordinated assault. Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces with target counts that continued climbing beyond anything their five-man team could reasonably handle. What had begun as a simple extraction was evolving into a major battle with unknown odds and unclear objectives. Williams discovered that the woman had been preparing for this confrontation for weeks. Medical supplies, ammunition, and tactical equipment had been strategically positioned throughout the facility. Her injuries were part of an elaborate deception designed to ensure that the responding team would lower their guard and follow her deeper into the building. Thompson's restored communications revealed the terrifying scope of the operation they had stumbled into. Similar attacks were being coordinated across multiple military installations, with elite units being systematically targeted and eliminated. The woman was part of something much larger than a single warehouse operation. Morrison made the command decision to treat her as a hostile operative, but her next actions complicated that assessment significantly. Instead of turning weapons on his team, she began coordinating their defensive positions with the expertise of someone who had extensive experience in military strategy and combat operations. The first exchange of gunfire demonstrated capabilities that left the SEAL team reconsidering their initial assumptions about what they were facing. The woman moved through the warehouse with intimate knowledge of every corner and passage, using the environment to maximum tactical advantage while maintaining communication with Morrison's team. Chen's demolitions expertise became crucial as the hostile forces outside began using explosive devices to breach the building's defenses. The woman directed him to specific locations where countercharges could be deployed, displaying knowledge of the building's structural weaknesses that suggested months of careful preparation. Rodriguez found his sniper position compromised as enemy forces deployed their own marksmen to elevated positions around the complex. The woman guided him to alternative locations within the warehouse that provided better fields of fire, while offering protection from the increasingly sophisticated assault being mounted against them. The woman's tactical communications revealed training that matched or exceeded what Morrison's team had received in their years of special forces preparation. She coordinated movements, anticipated enemy actions, and adapted strategies in real time, with the fluidity of someone who had commanded similar operations before. Williams realized that treating her injuries had become secondary to survival as the intensity of the assault continued escalating. The woman had planned for exactly this scenario, with medical supplies positioned at strategic locations throughout their defensive perimeter. Her wounds were being managed, but her operational capability remained uncompromised. Thompson intercepted communications between the attacking forces that revealed sophisticated coordination and military-grade equipment. The woman translated encrypted messages that his equipment couldn't decode, demonstrating familiarity with communication protocols that were supposed to be classified at the highest levels. The second wave of the assault brought heavy weapons that began systematically destroying the warehouse infrastructure. Morrison watched the woman direct his team's defensive efforts with tactical brilliance that suggested extensive combat experience in similar situations. Her leadership was natural and effective, despite the unclear nature of her actual allegiances. Chen deployed explosive charges according to the woman's instructions, creating defensive barriers and eliminating threats with precision that impressed even his experienced team. The woman anticipated every move the attacking forces made, countering their strategies before they could be fully implemented. Rodriguez's position reports indicated that the hostile forces were using military tactics and equipment that suggested government or paramilitary training. The woman's knowledge of their procedures and capabilities implied familiarity with their organization and methods that went beyond simple intelligence gathering. The woman revealed communications equipment hidden in the warehouse that enabled contact with resources the SEAL team hadn't known existed. Her access to real-time intelligence and tactical support suggested connections to government agencies or military organizations that operated beyond normal command structures. Williams noticed that the woman's injuries were healing faster than should have been possible, and her stamina remained high despite blood loss and physical stress. Her conditioning and medical preparation indicated training programs that exceeded standard military preparation. Thompson's analysis of the intercepted communications revealed that the attacking forces were eliminating other military teams at locations throughout the region. The woman's operation was part of a larger conflict that involved resources and capabilities beyond what any single organization should have been able to deploy. Morrison found himself following the woman's tactical leadership, despite his initial intention to maintain command of the situation. Her strategies were saving his team's lives, and her knowledge of the enemy forces was proving essential for their survival in a situation that exceeded their original mission parameters. The third wave of the assault brought armored vehicles and heavy weapons that transformed the warehouse complex into an active battlefield. The woman anticipated this escalation and had prepared defensive positions that enabled Morrison's team to engage targets they wouldn't have been able to handle with their original equipment and positioning. Chen realized that the explosive devices throughout the building weren't designed to eliminate the SEAL team, but rather to deny the facility to the attacking forces if the defensive operation failed. The woman had been planning for multiple contingencies, including scenarios where destroying everything might be preferable to capture. Rodriguez's overwatch position revealed the arrival of additional hostile forces that suggested this operation involved resources beyond what any criminal organization could deploy. The woman's preparation for exactly this level of opposition indicated foreknowledge that raised serious questions about her actual role and objectives. The revelation came during a brief lull in the fighting, when Thompson managed to access secure government databases through the woman's hidden communication equipment. Her real identity sent shockwaves through Morrison's understanding of everything that had transpired over the past several hours. Major Sarah Blackwood had been declared dead 18 months earlier during a classified operation in Eastern Europe. Her funeral had been attended by high-ranking military officials, and her name had been added to memorial walls, honoring fallen special operations personnel. Yet here she stood, very much alive, coordinating their defense against overwhelming odds. Chen studied satellite imagery on Blackwood's equipment that revealed the true scope of what they were facing. The attacking forces numbered in the dozens and had surrounded the entire industrial district with military precision. This wasn't a random assault but a carefully planned operation designed to eliminate specific targets, with Blackwood apparently being the primary objective. Rodriguez confirmed through his scope that some of the attacking forces were wearing uniforms and equipment that belonged to legitimate government agencies. The implications were staggering. Elements within their own military and intelligence apparatus were actively hunting one of their former operatives with lethal intent. Blackwood's explanation of her situation painted a picture of corruption and betrayal that reached the highest levels of government. She had discovered evidence of a conspiracy that involved selling classified information to foreign powers, and her apparent death had been staged to protect her while she gathered additional proof of the treasonous activities. Williams learned that Blackwood's injuries were indeed deliberate, but not self-inflicted as they had assumed. She had been tortured during her capture 18 months earlier, and the scars from that experience were part of what made her current deception convincing to anyone who might be tracking her movements. Thompson's access to classified databases revealed that multiple special operations teams had been dispatched to locations throughout the region, all responding to false emergency calls. Blackwood's intelligence network had identified the conspiracy behind these coordinated attacks, but her warnings had been dismissed by commanders who were potentially compromised. Morrison grappled with the reality that his team had been used as unknowing participants in what amounted to an assassination attempt against a legitimate government operative. The mission briefing that had brought them to the warehouse had been generated by the same corrupt elements that Blackwood was investigating. The fourth wave of the assault brought military helicopters that began systematic attacks on the warehouse complex. Blackwood directed the team to underground passages she had prepared as escape routes. But her real objective was becoming clear. She needed to keep them alive long enough to transfer the evidence she had gathered. Chen's demolitions expertise was put to use, creating diversions and obstacles that bought precious time for data transfer operations. Blackwood's hidden computers were downloading years of accumulated intelligence that documented the extent of the conspiracy she had uncovered during her time in deep cover. Rodriguez maintained overwatch duties from multiple positions as they moved through the underground passages. But the attacking forces had apparently anticipated this contingency. The tunnel systems were being systematically sealed by explosive charges, limiting their escape options with each passing minute. Blackwood revealed that she had been operating alone for over a year, building the intelligence network and gathering evidence while evading assassination attempts from the same people who had originally sent her on the mission that resulted in her apparent death. Her survival had depended on remaining officially deceased while continuing her investigation. Williams realized that Blackwood's physical condition was far better than her injuries suggested. Months of preparation and training had conditioned her for exactly this scenario, and her apparent vulnerability had been carefully calculated to ensure the right kind of military response to her false distress call. Thompson discovered that the communication jamming they had experienced earlier was designed to prevent Blackwood from transferring her intelligence to legitimate authorities. The timing of their mission had been calculated to coincide with a window when her evidence could be safely transmitted to trusted contacts within uncorrupted elements of the government. Morrison found himself commanding a mission that bore no resemblance to what he had been briefed to expect. Instead of extracting a compromised operative, he was protecting a deep cover agent whose intelligence could expose treason at the highest levels of national security organizations. The underground facility revealed the extent of Blackwood's preparation and resources. Communication equipment, weapons caches, and intelligence analysis capabilities that rivaled those of major government installations had been assembled over months of careful planning and preparation. Chen learned that the explosive charges throughout the complex were part of a dead man's switch system designed to ensure that Blackwood's evidence would be transmitted even if she was killed during the final confrontation. Her apparent willingness to die for the mission demonstrated commitment that exceeded normal operational parameters. Rodriguez's surveillance of the surface revealed that the attacking forces had received reinforcements that included heavy armor and air support. The conspiracy had access to military resources that suggested corruption within the chain of command, that authorized equipment deployments and personnel assignments. Blackwood's final briefing to Morrison's team revealed the names of high-ranking officials who were involved in the treasonous activities she had been investigating. The information she had gathered implicated generals, intelligence directors, and political appointees in a conspiracy that had been operating for years. Williams was tasked with ensuring that the team survived long enough for the intelligence transfer to be completed. Blackwood's medical preparation included contingencies for treating combat injuries that might be sustained during the final phase of her operation. Thompson established communication links with trusted elements within the government who had been waiting for Blackwood's signal to begin coordinated arrests of the conspirators. The timing of the intelligence transfer had been planned to coincide with simultaneous raids on multiple facilities where evidence was being stored. The surface assault intensified as the attacking forces realized that their window for eliminating Blackwood was closing rapidly. Morrison coordinated defensive positions while the intelligence transfer continued, knowing that the success or failure of the operation would determine whether years of treasonous activities would be exposed or successfully covered up. Chen prepared final explosive charges that would deny the facility to enemy forces, while ensuring that any remaining evidence would be destroyed rather than captured. Blackwood's planning included scenarios where partial success might be preferable to total failure if complete victory couldn't be achieved. Rodriguez maintained communication with aircraft that were approaching the area, but their identification remained unclear, until Thompson confirmed that legitimate government forces were finally responding to Blackwood's intelligence warnings about the coordinated attacks on special operations teams throughout the two region. The final confrontation erupted as legitimate government forces arrived simultaneously with the last wave of conspirators attempting to eliminate Blackwood and her evidence. Morrison's SEAL team found themselves in the unique position of coordinating between Major Blackwood and arriving FBI tactical teams who were executing arrest warrants based on the intelligence she had transmitted. Chen's explosive charges created a coordinated series of diversions that allowed government forces to establish perimeters around the industrial complex, while eliminating escape routes that the conspirators might have used to evade capture. The precision of the operation demonstrated months of careful planning that had anticipated exactly this scenario. Rodriguez confirmed through his scope that several high-ranking military officials were among the individuals being arrested at locations throughout the region. The scope of the conspiracy exceeded even what Blackwood had originally suspected, reaching into defense contractors, intelligence agencies, and political organizations at the highest levels of government. Williams treated Blackwood's genuine injuries while she continued coordinating with arriving federal agents who were processing the intelligence she had gathered during 18 months of deep cover operations. Her physical condition had been carefully managed to ensure operational capability during the final phase of her mission. Thompson's communication equipment provided real-time coordination between multiple law enforcement and military agencies that were simultaneously executing operations based on Blackwood's intelligence. The evidence she had gathered was enabling arrests and seizures that effectively dismantled a conspiracy that had been operating for years. Morrison watched as Blackwood transformed from an apparently vulnerable operative into a commanding presence that directed federal agents and military personnel with authority that reflected her actual rank and expertise. Her deception had been so complete that even experienced special operations personnel had been convinced of her supposed vulnerability. The warehouse complex became a crime scene processing center as federal investigators began documenting evidence that Blackwood had been accumulating for months. Her hidden facilities contained documentation, recorded conversations, and financial records that provided comprehensive proof of treasonous activities involving multiple government agencies. Chen learned that his demolitions work had been essential not just for their immediate survival, but for protecting evidence that could have been destroyed if the conspirators had gained access to Blackwood's hidden facilities. The explosive charges had been carefully positioned to preserve crucial intelligence, while denying it to hostile forces. Rodriguez's final surveillance reports confirmed that all known conspirators in the immediate area had been either arrested or eliminated during the coordinated government operation. Blackwood's intelligence network had provided accurate locations and timing that enabled law enforcement agencies to achieve complete tactical surprise. Blackwood's debriefing with federal investigators revealed the extent of her sacrifice and dedication during the 18 months she had remained officially dead while pursuing her investigation. Her apparent injuries and vulnerability had been carefully maintained to ensure that anyone tracking her movements would underestimate her capabilities and preparation. Williams documented medical evidence that corroborated Blackwood's account of the torture and abuse she had endured during her original capture. The physical evidence supported her claims about the conspiracy and provided additional proof of the criminal activities she had been investigating. Thompson's communication logs were preserved as evidence of how the conspirators had manipulated mission assignments and intelligence briefings to eliminate personnel who might have posed threats to their operations. Morrison's team had been targeted specifically because of their reputation for thoroughness and tactical excellence. Morrison received official confirmation that Major Blackwood's death had been staged with the knowledge and approval of a small group of trusted officials who had recognized the need for a deep cover investigation into suspected corruption within national security organizations. Her apparent resurrection was part of a carefully planned operation that had required years of preparation. The aftermath revealed that dozens of government officials, military officers, and intelligence personnel had been arrested in coordinated raids that occurred simultaneously with the warehouse operation. Blackwood's evidence had provided the foundation for prosecutions that would eliminate corruption at multiple levels of national security organizations. Chen's demolitions report documented how Blackwood had prepared the warehouse complex not just as a defensive position, but as a data processing and transmission facility capable of surviving sustained assault while completing intelligence operations. Her engineering and tactical preparation had exceeded what most special operations units could have accomplished. Rodriguez submitted surveillance reports that detailed the sophisticated coordination and equipment used by the conspirators during their assault on the warehouse complex. The evidence confirmed that corrupt elements within government agencies had access to military resources that enabled operations against their own personnel. Blackwood's final intelligence briefing revealed additional conspirators and operations that were still under investigation by federal agencies. Her work had exposed only part of a larger network that included international connections and ongoing threats to national security that would require continued investigation and prosecution. Williams' medical assessment confirmed that Blackwood's conditioning and preparation had enabled her to maintain operational effectiveness despite genuine injuries and the psychological stress of 18 months in deep cover, while being hunted by elements within her own government. Thompson's technical analysis of the communication equipment used during the operation provided evidence of how the conspirators had manipulated intelligence networks and command structures to coordinate attacks on loyal government personnel while protecting their own criminal activities. Morrison's after-action report acknowledged that his team's initial assessment of the situation had been completely wrong, but their tactical response and adaptability had been essential for the success of an operation that exceeded anything in their previous experience. The mission had challenged every assumption about chain of command, operational security, and trust within government organizations. The final revelation came weeks later, when Morrison learned that several members of his own command structure had been arrested as part of the ongoing investigation. Blackwood's intelligence had identified corruption that reached into every organization involved in special operations, demonstrating the necessity of her extreme measures and personal sacrifice. Blackwood returned to active duty with a promotion and assignment to a new organization dedicated to investigating corruption within national security agencies. Her experience and the intelligence network she had developed would continue serving to protect legitimate government operations from internal threats that had been operating with impunity for years. The warehouse district was demolished to eliminate any remaining evidence of the facility, but the intelligence Blackwood had gathered there continued generating arrests and prosecutions that transformed multiple government agencies and restored integrity to national security operations that had been compromised by years of treasonous activity.